Okay.
Orgy. Yashar Radio Shichi.
So, I really just wanted to take a moment today for us to kind of slow down, like just completely stop the clock for a little bit, grab a coffee, settle into the couch, and just take a deep breath with us. Because I've been reading something lately that has honestly completely shifted my entire perspective. And I mean, it has literally shifted how my physical body feels when my alarm goes off on a Monday morning.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think we all desperately need that kind of shift, honestly.
Right. It is just so real. So I've been doing a deep dive into this book called Every Good Endeavor, which is essentially about the deep underlying meaning of work. It's by Timothy Keller and Catherine Leary Alstorf. And I just had to bring it here to talk about with you because it touches on something that feels so raw and so incredibly universal for all of us right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Timothy Keller, I mean, he was just such an incredible voice.
He really was. For those listening who might not know, Timothy Keller was this incredibly grounding, just profoundly wise pastor in New York City. And he had this absolute gift, like a literal gift for taking these ancient, profound biblical texts and laying them perfectly over the intense, high-pressure, chaotic realities of modern city life and modern careers.
Yeah, he never just kept things up in the clouds.
Exactly. He didn't just speak in abstract theology. He spoke to, the lawyer who is working 80 hours a week and is completely burned out, or the barista trying to make rent, or the artist who is just constantly doubting their talent. And then you have Catherine Leary Alstorf co-authoring with him, and she brings this entirely different but equally powerful ground-level perspective because she was a tech CEO. She was right there in the absolute trenches of Silicon Valley.
Oh, man. Silicon Valley in the early days, that is an intense environment.
Insanely intense. And in the book, she shares this deeply vulnerable story about actually managing a company through the absolute devastation of the dot-com crash, like back in the early 2000s. And reading her account, it's just heart-wrenching. She describes the peak of that late 90s boom where everyone was literally treating technology like it was a religion.
Wow. A religion. That is a heavy word to use, but so accurate.
It really is. People were looking to the internet, to their IPOs, to their stock options, as if these things were the ultimate savior of humanity. She said her employees were more passionately devoted to their stock prices than to literally anything else in their entire lives.
Which is just, it's a recipe for disaster, right? Because markets crash.
Exactly. And that is exactly what happened. The bubble bursts just like that. The funding completely dries up overnight. The buyers who were supposed to acquire their company, they pull out at the absolute last minute. And she is forced to lay off 100 people. 100 people, and she has to close the doors of her company.
Oh, that is brutal. Just completely devastating.
Right. And she describes sitting there in the quiet rubble of this massive, crushing failure and asking this agonizing question. She asks, why did all this hard, good work end up like this? Where is the meaning in all of this failure?
That question right there, that is just, wow.
Yeah, and that story, it just made me let out this huge sigh when I read it. Because it brings us to the core question I really want us to unpack today with you guys listening. Why does our daily work, even the work we thought we genuinely loved, the careers we fought so hard to get into, why does it so often leave us feeling just completely exhausted, totally unfulfilled, or just walking around with this low-grade, constant anxiety? I really want us to just use this time to sit with that, to kind of peel back the layers and unpack what God's actual design for our work really is underneath all the modern noise.
Yeah. I am so glad you brought this to the table today. Because that question, that underlying feeling of exhaustion, is just so incredibly heavy, and it's something every single one of us carries, right? Whether you were sitting in a fancy corner office or you were working the night shift at a warehouse, we all feel it.
We really do. It's unavoidable.
It is. And, listening to you describe Catherine's story, just sitting in the literal ruins of that company she built, it deeply resonates because we pour so much of our lifeblood, our energy, our identity into what we do. And when it doesn't give us the return we expected, whether that's financial stability or emotional fulfillment or just a sense of purpose, it can absolutely break us. It leaves us so hollow.
Hollow is the perfect word for it, just completely empty.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you. We need to slow down and really look at this because to understand why our work hurts so much today, to understand that profound exhaustion you're talking about, we actually have to go all the way back to the very beginning, like to the original blueprint, because the fundamental argument Keller and Alsdorf are making is that our modern society has completely, totally misunderstood what work actually is.
Oh, entirely. We have it so backwards.
We do. We have
Yeah.
this assumption, and I think a lot of us, we just absorb this from the culture without even consciously realizing it. We assume that work is a necessary evil. It's the curse. It's the punishment, right? It's the thing you just had to get through during the week so you can finally afford to live your quote-unquote real life on the weekends.
Exactly. The whole working for the weekend mentality. It's literally everywhere.
Right. But Keller points out this shocking, just completely paradigm-shifting truth right from the opening pages of Genesis. In Genesis chapters 1 and 2, we are introduced to God. And the God of the Bible, the creator of the universe, is a worker. Take a second and really think about that. Because if you look at the other ancient philosophies, if you look at the ancient Greek or Roman myths, the gods are doing the exact opposite. They are lounging on Mount Olympus, they are resting, they are partying, eating grapes, whatever. And in those myths, the gods actually create humans specifically to do the dirty work for them.
Right. Like we're just their cosmic interns or something.
Yes, exactly that. We're just the hired help, so they don't have to get their hands dirty. They create humanity to handle the menial labor, the agriculture, the building, the sweeping, so that the gods can just relax and enjoy infinite leisure. And that specific philosophy, that Greek way of thinking, it deeply, deeply influenced Western thought for centuries.
It really did. It's ingrained in us.
It is. I mean, you look at a philosopher like Aristotle. Aristotle actually argued that true leisure, and by that he meant the financial and social ability to live your life without having to do any physical labor at all. He believed that was the only life worthy of a human being. He honestly thought that having to work for a living, having to sweat and toil just to survive, literally degraded the human soul.
Wow. That is so wild to think about. But it makes sense why we feel the way we do today.
Exactly. That was the air they breathed in the ancient world. But then you open Genesis, and the biblical God isn't lounging on a cloud. He doesn't just snap his fingers from a comfortable throne at a massive distance. He gets his hands in the dirt.
Yeah, he's a gardener.
He is a gardener. He is a craftsman. The text literally describes him forming humanity from the dust of the ground, planting a garden in Eden, carefully arranging the trees and the rivers. He's doing physical, creative, intentional work. And when he creates humans in his image, he gives them what theologians call the cultural mandate.
I love that term, the cultural mandate.
It's so good because he doesn't just put Adam and Eve in the garden and say, okay, here's some fruit, just hang out, relax, take a nap, and don't do anything. No. He explicitly commands them to cultivate the earth, to work it, and to keep it. And this is the part that completely blows my mind every single time I read it. This all happens before the fall.
Yes. Before sin ever enters the picture.
Exactly. It happens before sin enters the world. Work was in the Garden of Eden. Work was part of absolute, unblemished paradise. It wasn't introduced as a punishment. It was introduced as a fundamental human need. Keller argues that we need work just as much as we need food or sleep or deep friendships. We were designed for it from the very foundation of the world.
That is just so profound to sit with.
It really is. And when you look at it that way, when you realize that God himself did manual labor, it radically democratizes the entire concept of work. Because suddenly, the most basic, seemingly mundane physical labor, sweeping a floor, planting a seed, hammering a nail, has infinite dignity. Because you are reflecting the character of the Creator when you do it.
Oh, that is just, it's so beautiful. And it's such a massive relief to hear. Because it means that the desire to work, the desire to build something or make something isn't a flaw. It's not some greedy capitalist impulse at its core. It's part of the original divine design.
Yes.
It really makes me think of an analogy. Like, think about an airplane. So often we define freedom in our modern culture as having absolutely zero restrictions. We think being free means we can just do whatever we want, float around in the void, no obligations, no labor, just an endless permanent vacation.
Right. The dream of just sitting on a beach forever.
Exactly. But an airplane is only truly free to fly when it completely obeys the laws of aerodynamics. If a pilot decides he wants to be free from the laws of physics and just ignores them, the plane doesn't experience freedom. It crashes. It destroys itself.
Dan, that is a really, really good way to put it.
Yeah, and I feel like that's exactly what Keller is saying about us. We are only truly free, we only truly thrive and soar when we are doing what we were beautifully designed to do. And we were designed to work. We were designed to be in the garden, cultivating it, bringing order out of chaos.
Yes, that airplane analogy is so perfect.
Yeah.
There's exactly it. We are built for the aerodynamics of work. We are built to cultivate.
We really are.
But, and here's where we kind of have to pivot. Here's where the reality check comes in for all of us.
Yeah.
Because if that is true, if we were beautifully designed for work, and if work is inherently good, and if we were like airplanes designed to fly, then why is there so much turbulence?
Yeah. The turbulence is real.
It is so real. Why does Monday morning feel so incredibly heavy? Why do so many of us experience so much deep pain and frustration and just complete burnout in our careers? If the original blueprint is perfect, why does the building feel like it's constantly falling apart on us?
Yeah. Deep breath. That is the exact question, isn't it? And it's a question that feels so deeply personal. Because we've all been there. We've all had those moments where we were just staring at our computer screens or standing in our workplaces, feeling this deep, agonizing friction, just this heavy, heavy friction.
Oh, yeah. Every single one of us.
And to understand why that friction exists, the authors take us to Genesis chapter 3, to the fall, to the moment humanity separated itself from God. And what is so crucial here, what Keller points out so carefully, is that work itself was not cursed to become something inherently evil. The text in Genesis doesn't say, and now work is a curse. It doesn't say that.
Right. That's a huge misconception.
It is a massive misconception. The text actually says that the ground is cursed. It says that work will now be accompanied by thorns and thistles. The environment is going to push back. It means that work became frustrating. It became alienating, and it became often fruitless. The design is still good, but the execution in this broken world is flawed.
Wow. The environment is going to push back.
That is so incredibly true. Right. And we feel those thorns and thistles every single day, don't we? You plant the seeds with all your heart, but the drought comes and ruins the crop. You spend months building a piece of software, and there's a fatal bug in the code that crashes the whole system the night before launch.
Or the funding gets pulled, like Catherine Leary Alsdorf experienced.
Exactly. You pour your soul into teaching a classroom full of kids, but the systemic poverty in their lives makes it feel like you aren't making a dent. Or, you build a tech company in Silicon Valley and the market crashes and you have to lay off 100 people. Those are the modern thorns and thistles.
Man, that is heavy, but it makes so much sense.
It does. But as I was reading this, what really struck me, what really honestly broke my heart, is that the authors explain the brokenness isn't just external. It's not just the bad bosses or the market crashes or the literal thorns pushing back against us. The deepest, most painful brokenness is actually internal. It's inside of us.
Say more about that. What do you mean internal?
Well, because when humanity became separated from God in the fall, we lost our fundamental bedrock source of identity. We lost our absolute security. We lost the one thing that told us we mattered simply because we existed as his children. And so because we're desperate for that security, because we are absolutely terrified of being insignificant, we try to find that identity somewhere else.
Right. We try to manufacture it.
Exactly. We try to manufacture it. And for modern people, especially in our culture today, that somewhere else is almost always our careers. And this leads to this concept in the book that honestly, it kind of shook me to my core when I first read it. Keller calls it the work under the work.
Yeah, that concept is it is so piercing.
It really is. There's this story they share in the book, an anecdote about a young doctor. She is doing her residency in psychiatry in New York City. And anyone who knows about medical residencies knows it is just brutal, exhausting, sleep-deprived labor. It's inhumane, almost.
Oh, yeah, you're basically living at the hospital.
Right. So she is talking to an older, more senior colleague, and this older doctor happens to be pregnant with her second child. And the older doctor looks at her and says something that is just chilling. She says, "You know what I love most about being pregnant? I love that I am productive even while I'm sleeping."
Whoa, that is intense.
Isn't it? When I read that line, I literally had to put the book down. I just sat there staring at the page because that young doctor heard that and it shook her. It was this terrifying moment of clarity. She realized, and we realized reading it, that so many of us are using our productivity to literally justify our right to exist.
To justify our right to exist.
Wow. Yeah. We are desperately trying to prove to the world and to our parents and to our peers and ultimately to ourselves that we matter, that we are worthy of taking up space on this earth. We are looking to our jobs, to our output, to provide us with salvation. And that is what Keller means by the work under the work.
Oh, man. That is so heavy.
It is. Because the physical job might be treating psychiatric patients or writing marketing copy or selling real estate or making coffee. That's the physical work. But the work under the work is the frantic, desperate, exhausting spiritual attempt to save our own souls through our achievements. We are working to prove we are enough.
Wow. Yes. That is so incredibly true. And it is exhausting. Just thinking about it is exhausting.
Exactly, because it never stops. And if you are relying on your job for your salvation, if your career is your ultimate source of identity, you are setting yourself up for this unbearable anxiety. Because if you fail at your job, if you get laid off, or you make a massive mistake, or you just don't reach the level of success you dreamed of, you don't just feel disappointed, you feel completely destroyed.
Right, because your very identity is shattered.
Exactly. The thing you built your entire work on just collapsed. But then the flip side is just as terrifying. What if you succeed? What if you get the promotion and the huge bonus and all the accolades? You get to the top of the mountain and you realize it's empty. It cannot sustain your soul.
Yeah. And that just leads to that deep, dark cynicism.
It really does. You start to think, is this all there is? I gave my whole life for this and I still feel empty. It reminds me so much of the story of the Tower of Babel in Genesis. The authors use that story to illustrate this beautifully.
Oh, I love that connection.
It's so good. The people in Babel decide to build this massive, towering city that reaches up to the heavens. But the text tells us exactly why they were building it. They said, let us make a name for ourselves. It wasn't about the joy of architecture. It wasn't about creating a beautiful, flourishing city for people to live in. It was a project born out of deep existential insecurity.
They were terrified.
They were terrified of being scattered. They were terrified of being forgotten. So they tried to construct their own significance out of mud and bricks. And I was just thinking about you, the listener, and thinking about myself. Isn't that exactly what we do with our resume?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Isn't that what we do with our LinkedIn profiles? We are just building our own little towers of Babel. We are stacking up degrees and job titles and accomplishments, desperately hoping it will make us secure, desperately hoping it will make a name for us so we won't be forgotten. But it just puts us on this exhausting treadmill. And I guess the question is, how do we get off? How do we break free from this crushing weight of the work under the work?
Yeah. How do we get off the treadmill? That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because you're right. The weight of trying to justify your own existence every single day from 9 to 5, it will crush you.
Yeah.
It will absolutely crush you.
It really will.
And this is where the sources offer such a profound, beautiful pivot. This is where we get into the remedy, because having diagnosed the disease, the spiritual disease of making work our idol, of building our little towers of Babel, we have to look at the cure. And the cure is found in the gospel's radical redefinition of what a vocation actually is and the profound, deep rest that is found in Christ.
Yes, the cure.
To really understand this, we have to look back at the 16th century, to the Reformation, and specifically to Martin Luther. Because what Luther did with the concept of work was nothing short of revolutionary.
Oh, I am so fascinated by this part.
It's incredible. You have to understand, in the medieval period before Luther, the world was heavily, heavily divided. It's a very dualistic worldview. The quote-unquote spiritual realm, prayer, fasting, church, communion, that was elevated. That was seen as holy work. And the secular realm, the material world, physical labor, daily chores, that was degraded. It was seen as fundamentally lesser.
Right, like a two-tier system of holiness.
Exactly. So in that society, if you really wanted to serve God, if you wanted a true calling, you had to become a priest or a monk or a nun. Everything else, farming, baking bread, blacksmithing, making shoes, that was just menial labor you had to do to survive. It was a two-tiered system of human dignity. And it left the average person feeling like their daily grind had absolutely no spiritual value whatsoever.
Which is just so sad. Imagine living your whole life feeling like your daily work doesn't matter to God.
It's tragic. But Luther, he looks at the scriptures. He looks at the God of Genesis who gardens and gets his hands in the dirt, and he completely dismantles that hierarchy. He takes the word vocation, which literally means a divine calling, and he applies it to the everyday, ordinary jobs of everyday, ordinary people.
I love that. He just tears the hierarchy down.
He does. And to explain this, Luther uses this concept that it's just, it is honestly my favorite insight in all the materials we've looked at. It's so visually striking. He calls ordinary human jobs God's masks.
Oh, wow. God's mask. I love this so much. I could listen to this all day.
It is so beautiful. So Luther's idea is this. God is all-powerful, right? He could easily feed the entire world with a single snap of his fingers. He could just drop manna from heaven onto everyone's kitchen table every single morning. He doesn't need us to accomplish his goals.
Right. He is entirely self-sufficient.
But he chooses not to do it that way. Instead, God chooses to hide himself, to mask himself in the ordinary work of human beings.
Yeah.
He chooses to feed the world through the farmer who is out there planting the wheat in the cold, and through the truck driver who is driving through the night to transport that wheat, and through the miller who grinds it into flour, and through the baker who gets up at 3 in the morning to bake the bread, and through the grocery clerk who rings it up at the register.
Wow. That is just, wow.
Luther famously said that God is milking the cow through the vocation of the milkmaid. He is hiding behind her hands. And take a moment and just let that wash over you. Think about what that does to your perspective on a random Tuesday morning when you were stuck in traffic on your commute.
Yeah, when you were just feeling so incredibly over it.
Right. If you are a grocery clerk, if you are an accountant balancing spreadsheets, if you are a street sweeper, if you are a software engineer fixing bugs, you are the mask that God is wearing to care for his creation. You are the literal fingertips of God providing for the human family. God is hiding behind your daily labor to love the world.
Oh, my goodness. That changes everything. It literally changes everything.
It completely changes the entire purpose of your work. It completely frees you from the work under the work. Because if your job is just God's way of loving your neighbor, then the primary purpose of your work is no longer to make a name for yourself. It's no longer to build a Tower of Babel. The primary purpose is simply to love the people around you through your accomplishments and your service.
Yes, to just love them.
And what makes this actually possible, what gives us the power to actually live this way without falling back into anxiety, is the core truth of the gospel. Because the gospel frees us from having to earn our salvation. When Jesus Christ was on the cross, his final words were, "It is finished."
It is finished.
He didn't say, "I got it started. Now you guys go work really hard to finish it and prove you are worthy." He didn't say that. He said, "It is finished." The ultimate resume has already been written by him, and it is absolutely perfect. You don't have to work to earn your worth anymore. Your worth is entirely secured by his grace. You are completely known and completely loved right now exactly as you are.
That is just the most beautiful truth.
It is. And there is this incredible story in the sources that perfectly captures what happens when a person actually internalizes this grace.
Yeah.
It's about the legendary jazz musician, John Coltrane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This story is just, it moves me to tears.
It really is profound. John Coltrane, for years, struggled immensely. He struggled with severe addiction, and he struggled with the intense, crushing pressure of the music industry. He was trying to prove his genius. He was completely caught in the work, under the work.
He was building his Tower of Babel.
Exactly. But in 1957, he had this profound, deep spiritual awakening. He truly experienced the grace of God. He realized he didn't have to earn his worth through his saxophone anymore, and it completely changed his relationship with his instrument. He eventually released this absolute masterpiece of an album called A Love Supreme.
Such a brilliant album.
It is brilliant, and in the liner notes of that album, he wrote this beautiful dedication. He essentially said that he just wanted to use his music to make people happy. He wanted to use it as a way of saying thank you to God. He experienced what the ancient church tradition calls the Nunc Dimittis.
The Nunc Dimittis. What does that mean exactly?
It's from the story of Simeon in the Bible, who finally sees the infant Jesus and says, "Lord, now let your servant depart in peace." It is this feeling of ultimate soul-deep satisfaction. Coltrane was finally at peace. He didn't need the music to prove he was a genius anymore. He didn't need the music to justify his existence. He was finally free to just play, to just be the mask of God, bringing joy to people through sound. He was working from a place of rest instead of working for his rest.
Working from a place of rest instead of working for his rest. That is the whole paradigm shift right there. Because when you do that, when you drop the desperate need to prove yourself, you can actually just love the work for what it is. You can just enjoy the process.
Exactly. You are finally free.
But, I was thinking about this as I was reading, even with that beautiful mindset, even if we wake up and say, I am God's mask today, I'm working from rest, we still live in a world with thorns and thistles.
Yeah, we do. The curse is still out there.
It is. And we still have these days where our work feels so incredibly unfinished. It feels so small, or it feels completely forgotten. We have these grand visions of what we want to accomplish. We want to bring justice to the world, or we want to raise a perfect family, or we want to build a thriving community. But we only get, 70, 80 years on this earth?
If we're lucky.
Right. Our lives are so short, and our capacity is so incredibly limited. How do we deal with the limits of our short lives? How do we find peace when we look at our work and it just feels like a tiny, insignificant drop in the ocean?
Yes, the fear of being unfinished, that is a very real, very human ache. It haunts a lot of us.
It really does. And to answer that, the authors include this story at the very end of the book that, honestly, I want to just tell it to you slowly, almost like a bedtime story for a tired friend, because it is the most comforting thing I have ever read regarding our work and our anxiety about it.
Oh, please do. I love this story.
It's a short story written by J.R.R. Tolkien, the man who wrote The Lord of the Rings. And to really feel the weight of this story, you have to understand where Tolkien was emotionally when he wrote it. He was writing The Lord of the Rings during the outbreak of World War II.
Wow. Think about that context.
Right. He lived in Britain and the bombs were literally falling, and he had spent decades of his life inventing these intricate languages and histories and mythologies for Middle-earth. He had this massive, sprawling, beautiful vision in his head of what this epic story should be, but he was terrified. He was absolutely paralyzed by the fear that he was going to die before he could finish it.
Yeah, and he had already survived World War I, right? So he knew.
Exactly. He had already survived the horrors of World War I. He knew how fragile life was, and now the world was at war again. He was terrified that his life's work was going to be left as an incomplete, disjointed mess that no one would ever understand. And he was a massive perfectionist. He constantly got bogged down in the tiniest details.
Which is why his books are so good, but it must have been maddening for him.
Totally maddening. So, in the midst of this deep, existential despair about his work, he wakes up one morning and he writes this little short story called Leaf by Nigel. And Nigel, the main character, is a painter. And he is exactly like Tolkien. He's a perfectionist, he's easily distracted, and he has this grand, grand vision. Nigel has this picture in his mind of a magnificent tree, a towering, majestic tree with a sprawling forest behind it and snow-capped mountains in the distance. It is his masterpiece.
His ultimate work.
Yes. So he gets this massive canvas, and he sets it up in his studio, and he starts to paint. But Nigel is so obsessed with getting the details absolutely perfect. He spends days just trying to get the shading right on a single leaf or the dewdrop on a single blade of grass that he never makes any real progress on the whole tree. He just paints these hyper-detailed little leaves.
I think so many of us can relate to that.
Yeah.
Getting stuck in the weeds.
Oh, absolutely. And on top of that, the story says Nigel has a kind heart. So he is constantly getting interrupted. He stops painting to help his neighbors, especially this one neighbor named Parrish, who is always sick, always needs help with his house, and honestly doesn't even appreciate Nigel's art at all.
Typical.
Right. But Nigel keeps stopping his work to help him. Now, throughout all of this, Nigel knows that he has to take a long journey soon. The long journey is Tolkien's metaphor for death, and Nigel is dreading it because his canvas is mostly empty.
Yeah. The clock is ticking and the canvas is empty. It's such a universal anxiety, that fear of running out of time.
It really is. So one night, Nigel himself is feeling terribly ill, but Parrish's wife falls sick, and Parrish begs Nigel to go fetch the doctor. It's cold, it's raining, it's miserable, but Nigel goes. He rides his bicycle through the storm to get the doctor, and in doing so, he catches a severe, fatal fever.
Oh, man.
Yeah. He realizes his time is up. The authorities arrive to take him on his long journey, and as they're driving him away from his house, away from his studio, he looks back at his massive canvas and he cries out, "It's not finished!" And it is just this heart-wrenching moment, because all that is left in his house is a single, perfectly painted leaf on a giant empty canvas. The story says they put that one piece of canvas in the town museum, they call it Leaf, by Nigel, and soon after the museum burns down or it just decays, and the leaf is completely forgotten.
Wow.
In the earthly realm, Nigel's entire life's work amounts to absolutely nothing. It is swept away by time.
But that is not where the story ends.
No, it's not. And here is where the hope comes in. Here is the beautiful resolution. After Nigel's death, he is on this train, journeying into the afterlife. He goes through this period of reflection, and eventually he is allowed to continue his journey out into the heavenly mountains. He gets off the train, he starts walking through this beautiful, expansive landscape, and suddenly he stops. Because standing right there before him is a tree.
Oh, I love this part.
It's the best part. But it's not just any tree. It is his tree. It is the exact tree he had envisioned in his mind all those years on Earth but could never manage to paint. But here it is completely finished. It is alive. The leaves are unfurling, the branches are swaying in the wind, the roots are deep. And as he walks up to it, he looks closely at the branches. And right there, perfectly in place on this magnificent living tree, is the single leaf he had managed to paint on Earth.
Wow.
It wasn't lost. It was there. He looks at it. He opens his arms wide and he just whispers, "It is a gift."
It is a gift. Wow. That is just, it takes your breath away.
It really does.
Because what Tolkien is expressing there, it's not just a nice fairy tale to make us feel better. He is expressing a profound bedrock theological hope. He is saying that in the Christian worldview, the timeline of our work doesn't end with death. It doesn't end with decay and being forgotten. The biblical narrative ends with resurrection. It ends with the complete physical restoration of the entire world, a new heaven and a new earth. God is going to finish the masterpiece.
Yes, exactly. God finishes the tree, and I just want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now, because this changes everything about how we view our daily grind. It means that the tree is real. Whether you are an urban planner and you are striving your whole life for a just and equitable city, but you only ever managed to draft one zoning law that helps one single neighborhood, you didn't fail. You just painted a leaf. Or if you are a lawyer and you are fighting against a massive corrupt justice system and you only win a handful of cases while the system remains largely broken, you just painted a leaf. Or if you are a parent and you are exhausted packing lunches, mediating toddler tantrums, just trying to raise one compassionate, kind human being in a really dark world, you are painting a leaf.
Yeah. It's like we often feel like we are just standing in the mud, laying a single heavy brick, and we are exhausted. And we have no idea what the final building is going to look like. We can't see the cathedral. We only see the dirt and the heavy brick in our hands and our own tired muscles. But God is the master architect. He sees the cathedral.
Yes, he sees the cathedral.
And the promise of the gospel, the promise of the tree, is that God will finish the work of restoring this broken world. All the justice, all the beauty, all the healing, all the order you are reaching for in your daily job, that is the tree. And when that eternal reality is finally established, God will not lose a single brick you laid in faith. Your small, seemingly insignificant, faithful little leaf will be perfectly, beautifully integrated into the eternal tree. It is never, ever lost.
I just love that so much. It's so freeing. Because it means tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off, you can take a deep breath. Before you open your laptop, before you walk onto the hospital floor, or before you step into your workplace, I want to leave you with this gentle challenge. Just pause and ask yourself, whose mask am I wearing today? And whose love am I delivering? Because when you realize you are God's mask, you realize your worth was entirely perfectly secured before your workday even began. You can rest. And from that place of rest, you can go and faithfully, joyfully paint your leaf.
在今年不是的，在未来美国圣诞节，我们一起长谈吧。